Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The silver pod breached Earth's atmosphere with barely a whisper, its heat shield absorbing entry temperatures that would have incinerated lesser crafts. Inside, Operative Kira ran through her final mission protocols, her 6 fingers dancing across holographic controls as her outer membrane adapted to match human physiology. Infiltration parameters set, she sub-vocalized to the ship's AI. Planet assessment duration, 28 rotations. Decision matrix loaded. The Araxian Collective had been monitoring Earth for centuries. Humans were advancing too quickly, their technological progression outpacing their emotional maturity. The Council had decided if Kira's assessment confirmed humans as a potential threat, she would activate the dormant planet killer buried beneath Earth's crust eons ago. 1 billion Araxian lives had been lost to an emerging species once before. Never again. Her pod landed in dense woodland miles from human settlement. By dawn, Kira emerged looking perfectly human. 2 arms instead of 4, 5 fingers instead. Of 6, skin a warm brown instead of luminescent blue. Only her eyes retained a hint of their original violet, which she concealed behind dark lenses. The small coastal town of Harbor Point provided an ideal observation post, large enough to blend in, small enough to track behavioral patterns. Kira's prepared cover identity included appropriate documentation and a rented cottage overlooking the bay. 3 days into her mission, Kira stood on the weathered boardwalk, mapping community dynamics, when a fishing vessel approached the pier. She moved closer, recording the humans' interactions. Their inefficient verbal communication fascinated her. Araxians primarily communicated through bioelectric signals, precise and unambiguous. "So you look a bit lost," a voice said behind her. Kira turned, hand instinctively reaching for her concealed neural disruptor. A human male stood there, features symmetrical in what her briefing identified as conventionally attractive. His eyes, and the unusual transparent blue like Centauri crystals, crinkled at the corners. "I am oriented correctly," she responded, trying to match the local speech patterns her language module had absorbed. He laughed. The sound triggered unexpected sensory responses in her adapted nervous system. "I'm Max," he said, "marine biologist at the research center down the shore. New in town?" "Yes, I am." "Kira." She hesitated, unsure why she'd given her actual designation rather than her cover name. "I arrived recently." "Well, Kira, Harbor Point's community dinner is tonight at the lighthouse. Best way to meet everyone." He pointed toward a white structure on the distant cliff. "Come by if you want. First meal's on me." Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Galactic Nova Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. As Max walked away, Kira updated her mission log. Unusual invitation from local human. Accepting will provide optimal observation opportunity. No indication subject suspects non-terrestrial origin. That evening, surrounded by laughing humans sharing food and stories, Kira sent her first assessment to the collective. Humans display concerning tribal behaviors, but with unexpected cooperation patterns across genetic lines. Further observation required before activation decision. What she didn't report was the strange sensation in her chest when Max introduced her as our newest neighbor, and how the townspeople immediately included her in their conversations, asking nothing in return. Dawn broke over Harbor Point in shades of gold and pink that Kira's species had no words to describe. She stood on her cottage porch, recording atmospheric data while watching humans begin their daily routines. Their inefficiency both puzzled and fascinated her. Children dawdling on their way to education centers, adults stopping to exchange meaningless pleasantries rather than proceeding directly to productivity centers. Her observation log was filling with contradictions. The same species that waged wars over arbitrary territorial boundaries also established wildlife sanctuaries where they prioritized other species over economic gain. The same beings who polluted their oceans also organized volunteer groups to clean shorelines. "Morning, neighbor," Max called, walking up her path carrying 2 steaming containers. "Brought you coffee. Everyone needs coffee their first week in Harbor Point." Kira accepted the offering cautiously. Her biochemical analyzer indicated the beverage contained a mild stimulant and various flavor compounds. "Thank you," she said, mimicking the polite response pattern. "This is kind." "Just neighborly," Max replied, leaning against her porch, railing. "Say, we could use volunteers at the Marine Center today. Some injured SEALs came in last night. Interested?" Kira calculated rapidly. The invitation offered prime observation opportunities of humans interacting with their ecosystem. I would find that informative," she answered. The Marine Center occupied a repurposed warehouse on the northern pier. Inside, pools of varying sizes contained aquatic earth species in different stages of rehabilitation. Humans of diverse ages worked together, their movements displaying a curiously elegant chaos. "Ever worked with marine mammals?" Max asked, leading her to a cordoned area where a juvenile seal rested on a padded platform. "No," Kira answered truthfully. "No problem. You can help me prepare their medication." For 6 hours, Kira assisted Max and the other volunteers. She observed how they communicated through complex non-verbal cues, anticipating each other's needs with surprising accuracy. These humans demonstrated cooperation levels that, according to Araxian sociological models, should be impossible without a hive mind. That evening, Kira recorded her second report. Humans exhibit unexpected altruistic behaviors toward non-related species with no apparent evolutionary advantage. Their emotional attachments appear to drive actions counter to logical self-interest. Requesting clarification on assessment parameters. The collective's response was immediate, parameters unchanged, emotional behaviors irrelevant to threat assessment, focus on technological capabilities and resource consumption patterns. 3 days later, Kira stood in Max's laboratory, examining cellular samples from ocean water. Her enhanced vision could detect microplastics that human equipment missed. "How did you spot those?" Max asked, leaning close to her microscope. His proximity caused unexpected fluctuations in her adapted circulatory system. "Good eyesight," she replied, moving away slightly. "We could use your eyes around here more often," Max said. "The volunteer position could become part-time work if you're interested." That night, Kira's report included data on human pollution levels, but omitted her growing fascination with their music. How Max hummed melodies while working, how different the vibrations felt from the mathematical sound patterns of her home world. She didn't mention how she'd spent an unauthorized hour watching ocean waves, an activity with no observational value. The collective responded with growing impatience. Assessment timeline half complete. Preliminary activation recommendation required. Within 7 rotations, Kira closed her communication portal and walked to her window. In the distance, the lighthouse beams swept across the ocean darkness in regular pulses, like a heartbeat, like hope. The warning sirens began at exactly 3 in the morning. Kira was already awake. Araxians required minimal sleep cycles, analyzing soil samples from the beach when the wailing sound pierced the quiet night. Her first thought was that her cover had been compromised, that humans had somehow detected the planet killer's energy signature deep below their continental shelf. But the emergency broadcast that overrode her communication systems spoke of a different threat. Attention harbor. Point residence. Unexpected Category 4 hurricane approaching coastline. Estimated landfall in 8 hours. Mandatory evacuation for zones A through C. Emergency shelters opening at community center and high school gymnasium. Kira considered retreating to her pod. The storm offered an excellent opportunity to observe human crisis response from a safe distance. Yet something, perhaps a glitch in her adaptation protocols, led her instead to the harbor where evacuation efforts were already underway. The scene was organized chaos. Fishing vessels were being secured with extra mooring lines. Volunteers loaded emergency supplies into trucks. Local officials directed traffic toward higher ground. And at the center of it all stood Max, coordinating the Marine Center's evacuation. "Kira," he called when he spotted her. Rain had already begun falling, plastering his hair to his forehead. "Thank goodness! We need help moving the seal pups to the high school pool." Without waiting for her response, he thrust a specialized transport container into her arms. Inside, a young seal regarded her with dark, trusting eyes. For the next 6 hours, Kira worked alongside humans preparing for the storm's impact. She witnessed families opening their homes to strangers, restaurants distributing free food, children comforting frightened animals. None of this behavior aligned with the collective's briefings on human nature. When the hurricane hit, Kira and Max were at the high school shelter, monitoring the relocated marine life. The building shuddered under the storm's assault. Power failed within the first hour. Emergency generators hummed to life as rain lashed against windows and wind howled through every crack. "First hurricane?" Max asked, noticing her stillness, as she processed the storm's auditory assault. "Yes," she answered truthfully. "We'll be okay," he said, misinterpreting her analytical concentration for fear. His hand found hers in the dimness, warm and solid. Harbor Point's weathered worse. The physical contact sent unexpected data cascading through her sensory network. Skin temperature, pulse rate, the microscopic uniqueness of his fingerprints. She should have pulled away. Instead, her adapted hand tightened around his. By dawn, the storm had passed. Harbor Point emerged battered but standing. Kira watched in fascination as humans immediately formed recovery teams, prioritizing communal needs over individual comfort. Elderly residents were checked first. Food distribution centers were established before personal homes were assessed. Her report that evening was delayed by restoration efforts. She found herself participating in without conscious decision. When finally submitted, it contained observations the collective found deeply troubling. Humans demonstrate remarkable adaptation to crisis conditions. Social bonds strengthen rather than dissolve under pressure. Technological limitations compensated by cooperative behaviors. Revised threat assessment, uncertain. The collective's response was immediate. Operative compromised by integration protocols. Assessment period shortened. Activation decision required within 7 rotations. Enforcer dispatched as contingency. Kira stared at the message, feeling an unfamiliar sensation spreading through her chest. The humans had a word for it. Dread. Sunset painted Harbor Point in amber light as Kira helped Max repair the Marine Center's damaged roof. Below them, volunteers cleared debris from the facility's tanks and pools. The hurricane had passed 4 days ago, and the town was recovering with remarkable speed. "Hand me that hammer?" Max asked, stretching his arm toward her. Kira passed him the tool, noting how her adaptive physiology had grown accustomed to human proximity. Initially, she had maintained precise distance calculations to prevent detection. Now she found herself unconsciously mirroring human spatial patterns. "Perfect timing," Max said as they finished securing the last panel. "Just in time for tonight." "Tonight?" Kira questioned. "The phosphorescent tide. Happens a few times a year after big storms stir up the dinoflagellates." Seeing her expression, he added, "Tiny organisms that glow in the water. I'm taking my boat out to see it. Care to join me?" Mission parameters dictated avoiding isolated situations with the same human repeatedly, yet Kira heard herself accept the invitation. Hours later, Max's small sailboat drifted in the calm bay. The engine was silent, only the gentle lapping of waves against the hull breaking the night stillness. As darkness deepened, the water began to glow, each movement leaving trails of blue-green light like liquid stars. "Go ahead," Max encouraged, gesturing toward the water. Kira trailed her fingers through the dark surface. Light bloomed around her hand, swirling in patterns that reminded her of Araxian script. Something inside her shifted, a realignment of perception. "My people have a saying," Max said softly, watching her face in the ethereal glow. "The ocean reminds us how small we are, but the stars remind us how large we can dream." He pointed upward. Above them, freed from light pollution by the recent power outages, the galaxy spread across the sky in all its glory. Kira recognized constellations not by their human names, but by the navigational charts she had studied. There the path to Araxis Prime, there the collective's mining colonies, there the remains of worlds deemed threats and neutralized. Beautiful, isn't it? Max whispered. Yes, Kira agreed, but she wasn't looking at the stars anymore. Later that night, while Max steered them back to harbor, Kira experienced something unprecedented. Inside her adaptive body, chemical reactions created sensations her training hadn't prepared her for. Humans called it emotion, a phenomenon the collective considered evolutionary baggage, inefficient and dangerous. In her cottage, Kira began her report but found herself unable to complete it. The words felt hollow, inadequate to describe what she had witnessed, how humans found beauty in simple phenomena, how they created art and music that served no survival purpose, how they connected with each other through invisible bonds stronger than logic. Before she could finish, an urgent communication overrode her systems. Assessment period terminated. Planet killer activation sequence initiated remotely. Countdown, 72 hours. Enforcer arrival, 24 hours. Mission status, compromised. The message's implication struck Kira with physical force. The collective had decided Earth would die. Max would die. Everything she had observed, the resilience, the kindness, the capacity for growth, would be erased. For the first time in her existence, Kira defied her programming. She began calculating how to sabotage the planet killer. The action was treason. The punishment was dissolution. She continued planning regardless. Outside her window, Harbor Point slept peacefully, unaware that among them walked both their potential destroyer and, perhaps, their only hope for survival. Dawn found Kira descending into the abandoned salt mine where her pod was concealed. The cramped tunnel spiraled downward, illuminated only by the faint bioluminescence of her partially reverted skin. Her adaptive camouflage was failing, one of many signs that her connection to the collective was degrading. The pod's curved surface gleamed dully in her handlight. Inside, the advanced technology that had once represented her species' superiority now seemed cold and alien. Kira accessed the central navigation system, bypassing security protocols designed to prevent exactly what she intended. "Access, planet killer. Control matrix," she commanded. The system responded with a warning pulse that traveled painfully through her neural implants. Unauthorized access detected. Operative compromised. Collective connection terminated. Pain seared through Kira's nervous system as the collective forcibly severed her link. She fell to her knees, gasping as her body began accelerated reversion to natural Araxian form. Her skin flickered between human brown and native blue. Her concealed secondary arms began to emerge from previously invisible seams along her torso. Through waves of agony, Kira completed her sabotage attempt, not to deactivate the planet killer entirely, which was impossible without collective authorization, but to delay its countdown. Success would buy Earth perhaps 20 additional hours. The system accepted her partial override, but immediately transmitted an alert to the approaching enforcer. Her betrayal was now officially recorded. There would be no amnesty, no return. When Kira emerged from the mine, the morning sun momentarily blinded her. Her adaptive protection against Earth's radiation had weakened. Everything looked different. Colors more vivid, sensations more intense as her numbing connections to the collective disappeared. She needed to find Max. He was at the Marine Center, supervising the return of rehabilitated seals to their newly repaired habitats. His face brightened when he saw her, then immediately shifted to concern. "Kira, are you okay? You look—" He paused, studying her features. Different. She guided him to his private office and locked the door. "What I'm about to tell you will seem impossible," she began. "But Earth is in danger, and I need your help." For 20 minutes, Kira explained everything. Her true nature, the collective, their assessment protocol, and the planet killer. Throughout her explanation, her camouflage continued deteriorating. By the time she finished, her eyes had reverted to their natural violet, pupils vertically slitted. Max stood silently, hands gripping the back of his chair until his knuckles whitened. "Show me," he finally said, voice barely audible. Kira allowed her secondary arms to fully emerge and her skin to revert to its natural blue luminescence. Max exhaled slowly. "I should be terrified," he whispered. "I should be running for the door." "Why aren't you?" Kira asked. "Because I know you," he answered simply. "Whatever you are, wherever you're from, I know you." The trust in his voice triggered another cascade of unfamiliar sensations in Kira's chest. Humans called it many things: gratitude, affection, heartache. The collective called it weakness. "The Enforcer will arrive within hours," she explained. "It will complete the mission I've betrayed. We need to locate and neutralize it before it can reactivate the Planet Killer's countdown." "How do we find it?" Max asked, already accepting this impossible reality. "It will seek high ground with clear atmospheric access for communication," Kira said. "Somewhere isolated but with power infrastructure to boost signals." Understanding dawned on Max's face. "The lighthouse." Kira nodded. The lighthouse. As they prepared to leave, Max gently touched one of her blue hands. "Why?" he asked. "Why betray your people for us?" Kira considered the question, searching for an answer that encompassed the complexity of what she had discovered on Earth. "Because," she finally said, "your species values connection over perfection. You choose compassion when logic dictates otherwise. The collective sees this as weakness, but I've seen its strength. Humans don't just adapt to survive, you survive to love." Afternoon shadows lengthened as Kira and Max approached the lighthouse from its blind side, using the rugged coastline as cover. Kira's transformation had advanced further. Her height increased by several inches, her movements become more fluid and less human. She wore Max's oversized rain gear as disguise, though it would fool no one at close range. "The Enforcer will have defenses," Kira whispered as they crouched behind weathered rocks. "Non-lethal for me, but potentially deadly for you." "Any way to detect them?" Max asked. Kira removed a small device from what appeared to be her skin subdermal pocket, where she had stored essential equipment. The scanner expanded in her six-fingered hand, its surface glowing with shifting patterns. 3 perimeter alerts, she reported. Basic motion sensors calibrated for human mass and movement patterns. She pointed to nearly invisible discs placed on surrounding rocks and trees. Max studied them with a scientist's critical eye. "They're expecting humans, not marine life," he observed. Then, without waiting for her response, he slid down toward the water's edge and began covering himself with wet sand and seaweed. "What are you doing?" Kira asked. "Changing my thermal and visual signature," Max explained. "I'll approach from the water like a seal. They'll ignore me until it's too late." Kira felt something unprecedented, fear for another being's safety. "Too dangerous. The Enforcer has only encountered humans through your reports," Max interrupted. "Trust me. I've studied animal movement patterns my entire life." While Max created his disguise, Kira explained the Enforcer's likely capabilities and limitations. "It won't expect resistance. This is normally a simple cleanup operation after assessment." Max nodded, now almost unrecognizable beneath his improvised camouflage. "What's our actual plan once we're inside?" "The Enforcer will have established a direct link to the Planet Killer," Kira explained. "If I can access that link, I might override its protocols with my authorization codes." "Might?" "My codes may have been revoked when I was disconnected from the collective," she admitted. "But Enforcers are literal-minded. They follow protocols. There may be exploitable loopholes." They separated, Max crawling into the surf to approach. From the water, Kira using her natural Araxian abilities to scale the cliff face where no sensors were placed. As she climbed, memories of her training surfaced. Humans, dangerous due to unpredictability, primitive but evolving rapidly. Emotional responses override logical survival imperatives. What her training had labeled as weaknesses, she now recognized as humanity's greatest strengths. At precisely sunset, they converged on the lighthouse. Max triggered the perimeter alerts, deliberately, creating a distraction that allowed Kira to slip inside. The lighthouse interior had been transformed. Araxian technology covered the spiral staircase and central column, organic-looking devices that pulsed with energy. At the top, Silhouetted against the fading light stood the Enforcer. Unlike Kira, it had made no attempt to adopt human appearance. Its forearms manipulated holographic controls, while its exoskeleton gleamed metallically. "Operative Kira," it stated flatly without turning. "Your presence is expected. Your separation from the collective is regrettable." "The assessment is flawed," Kira responded, climbing the final stairs. "Humans aren't the threat we calculated. Irrelevant. Decision protocols executed. Planet killer activation in progress." Below, Max had entered silently through a ground-level window. Kira needed to keep the Enforcer distracted. "Request reconsideration based on new data," she said formally, using official collective terminology. "Humans demonstrate unique adaptability. Potential benefits to collective exceed threat metrics." The Enforcer turned, its sensory appendages focusing on her. "You've been contaminated by prolonged exposure. Emotional corruption detected." "Not corruption." "Evolution," Kira countered. "The collective fears what it doesn't understand." "Humans, embrace it." The Enforcer moved with sudden speed, pinning Kira against the curving wall. "Your dissolution is ordered," it stated. At that moment, Max struck, throwing the lighthouse's ancient manual foghorn switch. The deafening blast disoriented the Enforcer, whose sensitive auditory systems were unprepared for the primitive technology. Kira broke free and accessed the control panel, her fingers flying across the interface. But the Enforcer recovered quickly. It fired a neural disruptor that caught Max squarely in the chest. He collapsed, convulsing. "Humans," the Enforcer commented, dispassionately. "Fragile." Something shattered within Kira, the last remnant of her collective conditioning. With a cry that was beyond language, she launched herself at the Enforcer. The Enforcer's superior strength sent Kira crashing against the lighthouse controls. Warning indicators flashed across her vision. 2 cracked ribs, minor neural hemorrhaging. She ignored them, focusing instead on Max's still form on the floor. "You cannot prevent the inevitable," the Enforcer stated, its voice devoid of emotion. "This species represents unacceptable risk based on all established metrics." Kira pulled herself upright, positioning her body between the Enforcer and Max. "Your metrics are flawed," she countered. "The collective fears what it cannot control. Humans thrive because of it." The Enforcer's sensory appendages rotated, scanning her. "Your neural patterns show severe degradation from baseline. Emotion has compromised your higher functions." "Not compromised," Kira corrected. "Enhanced." Behind her, she heard Max stirring, alive but incapacitated. The neural disruptor would keep him paralyzed for approximately 20 minutes. She needed to resolve this confrontation before then. The Enforcer moved toward the control panel, its forearms working simultaneously to accelerate the planet killer's activation sequence. "The Council's decision is final. Earth's potential for technological advancement without corresponding emotional restraint poses unacceptable risk." "You haven't witnessed what I have," Kira argued, circling to keep the Enforcer's attention. "Humans collaborate across genetic and cultural boundaries. They sacrifice individual advantage for collective welfare without hierarchical compulsion. Irrelevant observations colored by contaminated perception," the Enforcer dismissed. Final. Activation sequence commencing. Kira knew she couldn't overpower the Enforcer physically. Its exoskeleton was reinforced specifically for combat situations. But watching humans had taught her something the collective considered impossible: innovation under pressure. While the Enforcer focused on the activation sequence, Kira discreetly detached 2 small devices from the lighthouse control panel, atmospheric stabilizers used to protect Araxian technology from Earth's oxygen-rich environment. With precise movements, she reconfigured their internal mechanisms. "The collective claims to value life above all else," she continued, keeping the Enforcer engaged in debate, another human tactic. "Yet it destroys potential instead of embracing diversity." "The collective preserves balance across galactic ecosystems," the Enforcer countered. "One primitive species cannot outweigh universal stability." "How many worlds have we destroyed based on theoretical threats?" Kira asked. "How many unique perspectives lost forever?" The Enforcer paused, its programming encountering an unexpected philosophical query. In that moment of hesitation, Kira struck. She threw the modified atmospheric stabilizers at the Enforcer's feet. They detonated with controlled force, releasing concentrated oxygen that reacted violently with the Enforcer's exoskeleton, designed for oxygen-poor environments. Warning lights flashed across its surface as protective systems overloaded. Kira didn't waste the advantage. She leapt forward, using all four arms to access the Enforcer's neural ports simultaneously. Her fingers moved with desperate speed, inputting override codes that should have been purged from her memory when the collective severed her connection. The Enforcer convulsed, caught between conflicting commands. Unauthorized access detected, it intoned, voice distorting. Priority override rejected. Not rejected, Kira corrected. Reinterpreted. She had learned this from humans, working within rules while redefining their application. Her override didn't cancel the Enforcer's mission, but recategorized Earth's threat assessment based on factors the collective had never considered. Capacity for joy, for art, for love without evolutionary advantage. For 70 agonizing seconds, the outcome remained uncertain. Then the Enforcer's system stabilized, its lights shifting from emergency red to standard blue. Assessment parameters expanded, it announced. Recalculation in progress, new variables incorporated. Kira watched warily as the Enforcer processed the unfamiliar metrics. Behind her, Max had regained partial movement, dragging himself toward her despite obvious pain. Conclusion reached, the Enforcer finally stated. Human species presents insufficient threat under expanded assessment parameters. Planet killer deactivation recommended. Relief flooded Kira's system so intensely she nearly collapsed. Authorized, she confirmed. The Enforcer turned toward its control panel, four arms working in precise coordination. Planet killer deactivation sequence requires collective confirmation. Request transmitted. Kira's relief evaporated. The collective will never approve. Correct, the Enforcer agreed. Deactivation request denied. Enforcer autonomy revoked. Remote override in progress. The control panel suddenly flashed crimson. The Enforcer's eyes shifted back to combat mode as the collective reasserted direct control. Priority mission reinstated, it announced, voice once again emotionless. Planet killer activation continuing. Estimated planetary destruction, 12 hours. Operative Kira designated for immediate dissolution. As the Enforcer advanced toward her, Kira made the most human decision of her existence. She improvised. Kira lunged not at the Enforcer, but past it toward the control panel. Her fingers danced across the interface, executing commands that would have been considered heresy on her homeworld. She wasn't trying to deactivate the planet killer anymore. That was impossible without collective authorization, but she could reprogram the Enforcer's ship. The Enforcer grabbed her with two arms, while the other pair continued the activation sequence. Resistance is inefficient, it stated. Your dissolution is inevitable. From the floor, Max had managed to reach the lighthouse's ancient electrical box. With trembling hands, he pulled the master switch. Darkness engulfed the lighthouse. The Enforcer's systems flickered momentarily as backup power engaged. That microsecond interruption was all Kira needed to break free and complete her reprogramming. When emergency lights illuminated the room, the Enforcer found Kira standing beside Max, supporting his weight as he struggled to stand. Your efforts change nothing, the Enforcer stated. Planet killer activation cannot be prevented. Evacuation ship is now locked to my genetic signature only. I don't want to evacuate, Kira replied calmly. The Enforcer's sensory appendages rotated in confusion. Clarify. Without evacuation, your dissolution is certain. Some things are worth dissolution, Kira said, looking at Max. The Enforcer processed this statement according to its programming and found no logical response. It returned to the control panel, confirming the planet killer's countdown. Final activation complete, it announced, departure sequence initiating. As the Enforcer moved toward the exit, Kira whispered to Max, "When I give the signal, trigger." The foghorn again. The Enforcer reached the staircase. In precisely 8 seconds, it would be within transmat range of its ship. Kira waited until the last possible moment. "Now!" she shouted. Max hit the foghorn switch. The deafening blast disoriented the enforcer just long enough for Kira to tackle it. They tumbled down several stairs before the enforcer regained control, pinning Kira against the wall. "Your actions are irrational," it stated. "They're human," Kira corrected. She pressed her palm against the enforcer's neural connection port, not attacking but sharing. In a massive dump of unfiltered data, she transferred her experiences on Earth directly into the enforcer's processing system. Max's kindness to a stranger, townspeople rebuilding together after disaster, the phosphorescent waters glowing like captured stars, the taste of coffee on a cold morning. The enforcer's systems overloaded, trying to categorize experiences it had no context for. In that moment of confusion, Kira activated the final command in her reprogramming sequence. The lighthouse windows flashed brilliant blue as the enforcer's ship initiated emergency launch protocols. But instead of departing with the enforcer aboard, it launched empty, broadcasting on all collective frequencies. "What have you done?" the enforcer demanded, its voice fluctuating as it processed Kira's emotional data. "Created doubt," Kira answered. "The ship carries unfiltered records of my experiences here, transmitted directly to the Council, and a warning buoy that will scramble Araxian navigation systems around Earth for at least 200 years, giving humanity time. The collective will send others," the enforcer warned. "Perhaps," Kira acknowledged, "but they'll come with questions. Not certainty. That's all humanity needs. A chance to show what makes them unique in the universe." The Planet Killer's activation process abruptly halted. On the control panel, status indicators flickered between red and blue before settling on amber. Suspended. Animation. "Explain," the enforcer demanded, its system still processing Kira's emotional data transfer. "The collective programmed contingencies for everything except doubt," Kira said. "Your systems can't reconcile your original programming. With the experiences I've shared, the conflict has triggered an automatic suspension, pending further review." As dawn broke over Harbor Point, the enforcer departed on foot, moving inland with mechanical precision. Its mission parameters had become paradoxical, unable to complete planetary destruction, yet equally unable to abandon its purpose. It would continue gathering data, perhaps for centuries, caught between duty and dawning awareness. In the lighthouse, Max leaned against Kira, both exhausted from the night's confrontation. "Is it over?" he asked quietly. "For now," Kira replied. "Earth is safe for at least 2 human lifetimes." Max absorbed this information with remarkable calm. "And you? Will you go back?" Kira looked toward the horizon where the enforcer's ship had disappeared into the stars. "I can never return to the collective. My connection was severed. I am alone." "Not alone," Max corrected, taking her blue, 6-fingered hand in his. The touch sent cascades of sensation through Kira's nervous system. Familiar now, welcome. Weeks passed, Harbor Point rebuilt after the hurricane. Life resumed its rhythm with one notable addition, a blue-tinged woman with unusual eyes who worked at the Marine Research Center. Townspeople asked few questions. In a world of increasing strangeness, they simply made room for one more difference. On a clear evening 6 months later, Kira and Max stood on the same cliff where the lighthouse had once guided ships through dangerous waters. The structure remained, but its interior had been stripped of alien technology, leaving only empty history. "Do you regret it?" Max asked as they watched stars appear above the darkening ocean. "Saving us?" Kira considered the question carefully. The loss of her connection to the collective, a bond that had defined her existence since inception, should have been devastating. Yet in its place had grown something far more complex. Individual relationships, unique experiences, the daily discovery of what it meant to choose rather than follow. "The collective believes emotion is evolutionary baggage," she finally answered. "That logic alone leads to advancement, but humans prove otherwise. You feel deeply and think brilliantly. You create art alongside technology. You find meaning in impermanence." She turned to face him, her violet eyes reflecting starlight. "My species lost something vital in our pursuit of perfection. We forgot how to change, how to grow through connection rather than calculation. And that's why you stayed? Max asked. Kira smiled, an expression she had once mimicked, but now felt genuinely. I stayed because humans taught me something the collective never could. What's that? That love isn't weakness, she said simply. It's the greatest strength in the universe. Above them, stars winked into existence, billions of points of light representing worlds Kira would never see again. Yet as Max's hand found hers, she felt no loss, only possibility. She had come to destroy a world and instead found a home. Across the galaxy, the collective received the data packet from the Enforcer's ship. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Council faced uncertainty. Protocols dictated Earth's immediate destruction, yet the unfiltered experiences transmitted from Operative Kira suggested something unprecedented, a species whose emotional capacity enhanced rather than hindered its evolution. The debates would continue for centuries. More observers would be sent, some to return changed as Kira had been. Slowly, inevitably, doubt would spread through the perfect system like cracks in ice, not destroying but transforming, creating space for new growth. Meanwhile, on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star, humanity continued its chaotic, beautiful progress, unaware that its greatest strength had already been recognized by the stars.